I have a number of apologies, and these have been received from Deputy Cooney, Senator Craughwell and Senator Wilson. And before we begin, I want to bring to your attention, as I am required to do at the start of every meeting, the issue of privilege. Witnesses giving evidence from within the parliamentary precincts are protected by absolute privilege in respect of the evidence that they give to the committee. This means that a witness has a full defence in any defamation action for anything said at a committee meeting. However, witnesses are expected not to abuse this privilege and may be directed to cease giving evidence on an issue at the Chair's discretion. Witnesses should follow the direction of the Chair in this regard, and a reminder of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that, as is reasonable, no adverse commentary should be made as against an identifiable third person or entity. Witnesses who are to give evidence from a location outside the parliamentary precincts are asked to note that they may not benefit from the same level of immunity from legal proceedings as a witness giving evidence from within the parliamentary precincts, and may consider it appropriate to take legal advice on this matter. Privilege against defamation does not apply to the publication by you outside of the proceedings held by the committee of any matters arising from the proceedings. Members, I'd like to advise you of the constitutional requirements that members must be physically present within the confines of the Leinster House complex in order to participate in public meetings. I will not permit a member to participate where they are not adhering to this constitutional requirement. Therefore, a member who attempts to participate from outside the precincts will be asked to leave the meeting. In this regard, I would ask any member partaking via MS Teams, I don't believe we have any at the moment, that prior to making their contribution to the meeting that you confirm verbally that you are on the grounds of the Leinster House campus. Members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice that you should not criticise or make charges against any person or entity by name or in such a way as to make him, her or it identifiable, or otherwise engage in speech that might be regarded as damaging to the good name of the person or entity. Therefore, if your statements are potentially defamatory in relation to an identifiable person or entity, you will be directed to discontinue your remarks. It is imperative that you comply with any such direction. The agenda for today's meeting is the extension of the EU-UK trade agreement and the implications for the Irish fishing and seafood sector. And as agreed previously by this committee, we'll firstly hear from the Minister of State with the Department of Agriculture, Food, Fisheries and the Marine, with special responsibility for fisheries, that's Timmy Dooley Tachtadala, and his officials. And I will ask the Minister now to introduce your officials, if you don't mind, Minister.
Thanks very much. Just with me is the Assistant Secretary within the Department, Sinead McShelly, and Anna O'Sullivan from the Department of Agriculture and Food and Marine.
And just to point out that while the Minister may call on his officials to speak briefly for clarification during the meeting where a specific or technical point arises, the officials can clarify issues for the committee, so they have an opportunity to speak here and to answer questions. However, any follow-up questions should be put to the Minister because he is the accountable person who's here before the committee. The opening statement from the Minister has been forwarded to the members, and as the time for this discussion is fairly limited, I'll ask you, Minister, to give a brief synopsis of it in around 2 minutes, and then we'll proceed to questions and answers, if that's okay. And I just want to formally welcome you coming before the committee. It's something that we were eager to have you in here. I think it is a really important result for the Irish fishing industry that there is now both a committee examining fisheries and maritime affairs and indeed a minister with responsibility for these issues. So, Minister, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Cahill, and to thank you and congratulate you on your appointment and to all those on the committee, and just to say how much I'm looking forward to working with you on an ongoing basis. I've already provided you with a written statement, and I don't intend to go through it word for word. I'll just give a brief overview as an introductory point, and then we can try to ask questions or answer questions that arise. I spent a lot of time on the other side of the fence here, so I know that it can be somewhat frustrating when witnesses come and take up all their time reading prepared statements, so you have it and you can work from there. Just, I suppose, at the outset to say that this government are really committed to the maritime sector, which is why the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach in the programme for government have established the role that I'm privileged to occupy, which is really about trying to create a virtual department of the Marine, bringing together all aspects of the sector that have been kind of, I suppose, broken up over recent years from a point 15 years ago when we had a full Department of the Marine. There are aspects within the Department of Agriculture, particularly Fisheries, which is central to all of that, and then in the Department of Climate Change, areas around marine planning, marine protection and marine environment. And my role is to try to coordinate all of that from a regulatory and a policy perspective and then an implementation in terms of the plans that the government has generally for the seafood sector in the first instance, for the offshore renewable opportunities that exist, and to make good on our commitments in relation to marine protected areas. And whilst that's not the subject of today's meeting, I just wanted to put that as part of the opening discussion around the government commitment and what it seeks to do. And I'm happy to answer any questions on that either now or later. Just in relation to the subject matter that you want me to talk about today, the EU-UK trade agreement and the implications for the fishing industry, I'm very conscious that the fishing industry suffered a massive hammer blow with the advent of Brexit. I think it's well recognised over the next 10 to 12 years that it will impact to the tune of about $1 billion on the processing sector and about 800 million on the catching sector. And whilst the Brexit Adjustment Fund, which was provided by the EU and national government, is and has been a very significant instrument in assisting the industry to pivot beyond the impact of Brexit, I've no doubt that the industry still have a very considerable way to go in meeting the exacting demands that were brought about as a result of the loss of that quota, and I'm mindful of that, as is the department in all our actions. But I would also say that in my significant engagement since my appointment with the sector, there's a resilience and a recognition that failure is not an option, and they do propose to continue to work ahead.
Perfect. Ara, thank you, Minister. I'll now open it to questions, but before I do, I just want to suggest that for this section that we take 5-minute blocks, so that will include your question and the Minister's response. There will be a timer on display around the room, and I would ask you just to keep with that, and if there is, that should leave us some opportunity for a second round of questions. I understand that some members will have to leave for various other engagements. I've asked for indications, I've been taking notes, so I have, so please indicate if you want to speak. I have most of you down already. You've indicated, okay. So the first on the list of indicators is Deputy Whitmore.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the Minister. And I do welcome the fact that this virtual department, I think it's really important to bring those different elements together, and look forward to working with you on that. I just have a number of questions. Just in relation to the MPA legislation, I welcome the fact, because I received confirmation this week, that will be a standalone bill. It will remain as a standalone piece of legislation, because there was concerns that it was going to just be an amending piece of legislation or perhaps be used as the DMAP process. So I do welcome the confirmation from the department this week that it will be a standalone, and it's expected to be given at the end of, I think, to come through the Dáil towards the end of the year. When do you envisage that actually that remit as such moves over to this committee? Because obviously that will be a large thing that we will be looking at. So that's one element. The other element is, and it's sort of adjacent to the EU-UK deal in that it's another deal with a third party. There's been concerns raised with me in relation to potential deal between the EU and Iceland. And I'm just wondering if there's any information on that. It seems, it's been raised at a number of different points, but I don't think there's been any confirmation about it. And also then in relation to the issue of sprat, obviously that's a time-sensitive issue because the fishing season will be in September. So where is the consultation in relation to the management of that fishery? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Deputy. So just the issue that you raised in relation to the MPA legislation, I'm not sure of the response that you got or from which department, but I can give you an overall objective here from the government perspective, and it's to ensure that we achieve 30% marine protected areas by 2030, which is a commitment that the government has given, and I have reiterated on behalf of the government on a number of occasions, most recently at the UN Ocean Conference just earlier this week in Nice. That function, as I understand it, which is marine environment, is still with the Department of Housing and Local Government. My understanding is that it will transfer shortly, and I'm hopeful that that will be within the Department of the Department of Climate Change by the autumn. So I don't have any responsibility in relation to the passage of that legislation just yet, so I can't give you any commitment in relation to it. What I am really anxious to do, though, and I've discussed this with the marine planning section of the department, is that we advance it without delay. I'm really conscious that that commitment it shouldn't be just about a commitment, it's about action. Whether or not it will be standalone legislation or not, I can't confirm at this stage. My view is aimed at getting it delivered and getting a regulatory regime in place where we can do it. I've some thoughts about how it might be able to be done, recognising that we've already announced, the government has already announced a decision to do a national DMAP, so a marine area plan, a designated marine area plan, and you'll be familiar with the fact that there has been a regional DMAP done off the southeast coast, which is very successful in terms of identifying the area, and there will be a number of auctions that will develop for that for offshore renewables. I'm conscious that when that work is being done in establishing or developing a marine area plan, that a lot of the same work is required to do a marine protected area. And I'm looking at the possibility of coordinating the two, as we develop a national DMAP, that we look to at the same time carry out a programme that will identify areas for marine protection. Whether or not that will require a single individual bill, or whether it will be a significant amendment to existing legislation like the Marine Planning Act of 2021 may ultimately be the vehicle which will allow us to progress it more fully. But I will engage with you, Deputy, because I know your interest from my time serving with you on the other side here of your interest in that area, and I will certainly engage with you on that. On the EU-Iceland agreement, discussions have taken place at European level. We have engaged with the Commission in terms of what our position might be, but nothing further has emerged from that. There were some initial indications that there was a desire to reach an agreement on blue whiting in the early stages, and that the opportunity for Iceland fishermen and women to access to Irish waters, EU waters in that regard, but that hasn't progressed with any great haste. There was an indication that there was a desire to have discussions expedited by the end of May, but as of now, and I met with the Commissioner again just earlier this week in Nice, and there was no further movement on that. I know that
Minister, I'm going to have to move on to the...
Sorry, yeah. Just on this, can I address the Sprat issue? Yeah. Because I'm conscious that it's an issue that has been raised by a number. There is a government commitment to address this issue. There was a previous policy position taken, which resulted in a decision of the courts that ran contrary to what the then government had wished to do. A new process was engaged with, which has consultation. I think there was over 5,000 responses to that particular call for submissions. The department is preparing a number of options for ministerial decision, and I'm conscious of the need to address this issue, and I hope to be able to proceed before the summer.
Minister, there might be an opportunity to address this in response to other speakers, or indeed in the second round. Deputy Ward.
Minister, I want to congratulate you, and I look forward to working with you over the term. My first question, I've got two questions for you. Minister, I think we can all agree that Brexit's been a disaster for the fishing industry in Ireland. The TCA was a disaster. Why did the government not seek to ratify this EU trade agreement? I'll just go on to the second one. Where Ireland's interests are communicated through the negotiations of the EU trade agreement, if so, what was agreed? Okay, so your first question, which is why did Ireland ratify the renegotiated TCA agreement? So the decision that was taken on Brexit, which was a decision of the European Union, all discussions around the exit of Britain from the European Union were handled by the Commission. Obviously, we're a contributing party, and our views and aspirations are taken into account, but only taken into account. Commissioner Šefčovič
negotiated that, and you will recall at the time that the then facilitator, Michel Barnier, was a very significant player in those discussions. Look, from an Irish perspective, we recognise absolutely that the fishing sector took a very significant hit in that regard. But that was the way it was negotiated. It didn't favour our position, but at the end of the day, we had no choice but to accept. It wasn't an either or. It wasn't as if we had the capacity to veto. And then over recent months, part of that initial agreement was that there would be a review in relation to fishing up to June of 2026. All the diplomatic channels and all the background noise and chatter was that the British would not permit continued access for EU vessels into their waters without a significant further shift in quota. My predecessor and myself, since coming to this particular post, had made it very clear in the strongest possible terms, and all our negotiators at European level made it very clear that Ireland's position was that we would not accept the trading of one more fish for continued access. We had felt we had given a phenomenal amount in terms of quota for that continued access. So when the TCA was when that recent agreement was coming to place, we fought hard. Initially, there was an offer of continued access for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and together with a group of 8 like-minded member states, we succeeded in getting that from what was an initial offer of, I think, about 2 years to 12 years. I think that's a good deal, a very significantly positive outcome that gives certainty to the catching sector and to the processing sector. But as I said in my opening remarks, it in no way rights the losses that were taken as a result of Brexit. So I'm conscious that that's still an overhang, and a very significant overhang for the industry. But in terms of the recent renegotiated trade deal, I think it was a very significant positive outcome, particularly for us to be able to fish within UK waters. See, the bit that's often maybe lost in discussion, I'm not suggesting that it's lost in here, but we had very little to trade with. Ultimately, the British were able to catch their quota in their waters, by and large. So it wasn't as if this reciprocal access to waters benefits the British as much as it benefits European vessels. So we were running out of road, and that's why this was a useful way to stitch in the longer term commitment. If we were left with a situation where we didn't agree in this particular agreement and we let it run till next June, we'd no chip to spend effectively. And the British then would want to do it on an annual basis, which is what they were suggesting, taking particular stocks as they wish. So I think this was a comprehensive way to deal with it, and give us an opportunity to give certainty to the sector, which allows for the kind of investment that's needed and give some direction of travel for the next 12 years. I don't know if that helps.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Margaret, Ara. Next is Deputy McLaughlin.
Thanks very much, Cahirla. So after you come in, Minister, there's going to be a number of delegations from the fishing organisations, as you know, and we've had a chance to read their input in advance. I suppose ideally we would have preferred to have them in first and then have their issues, and then we could directly, freshly put them to you, but that's just not the way it's worked out today. Hopefully that won't be the case in future.
I'm happy to come back at any stage to facilitate discussions like that.
That's fine. And thanks, Minister. And I appreciate it. First of all, congratulate you on your appointment. I think it is a vital development that we have two things. We have a dedicated minister dealing with fisheries, and we have a dedicated committee dealing with fisheries. And I know it's wider than just fisheries, but it gets a really strong emphasis. I published, I and my colleague, the chairperson in our party, Sinn Féin, we published a survey. And it makes for a survey of fishermen, of people who work in the seafood industry, businesses and workers. And none of us who are listening to those communities will be shocked by the outcome, but it's it's devastating, really. You know, 9 out of 10 of those who responded said they wouldn't encourage their children to continue in the tradition of fishing. 9 out of 10 felt that they were in a worse position now than they were 10 years ago. Nobody, not one of the respondents, and the respondents were for all around the coast. We've published the locations, and it was hundreds of people who, and more importantly than the statistics, because none of that would shock us, is the actual testimonies. You know, they took time to write their stories, and some of their quotes are within the survey, and we'll send it on to you, Minister. But I think it sets the scene for the huge challenge you have and the huge responsibility you have. And I do commend you. I believe you've been engaging with the industry. I've seen it at first hand, and I believe you're listening to the industry, and that is a step in the right direction. But we have to get to the point of a plan of how we turn this around. And in the particularly, obviously, in terms of this subject matter, the Common Fisheries Policy and Brexit, the submission from the Seafood Ireland Alliance is particularly important, because they draw our attention to the fact that Brexit has probably cost our industry about 180 million at this stage, but they estimate up until the end of this new deal, the 12-year extension, it will cost us about 800 million in lost opportunity. It's a lot of money to those sectors. And so you've said, you know, that the British, that's a negotiation between the British and the European Union, and that's fair enough at that level. But the European Union must accept that we've taken the unfair burden from that negotiation. Like, if the European Union are saying this is the best deal we can negotiate, it gives stability for 12 years, that's their perspective. But the outcome of that is it extends the injustice of what we've endured. And with all due respects, the Brexit Adjustment Reserve Fund doesn't go anywhere near dealing with that. So I'd just like to get a sense of your plan. Like, we talked in our manifesto about a dedicated office in Europe called Fish Ireland, similar to some of the work that's the IDA and others would do in promoting trade, but also working in partnership with our industry. So the government and the industry united, promoting our sector, but more importantly, reaching out to allies in Europe. I mean, the whole issue around the behaviour of Iceland, Faroes, Norway, in terms of ignoring scientific evidence, overfishing mackerel, and then getting a very good deal on other species and mackerel in trade. So they're being rewarded for being irresponsible. So, and then if you look at the whole issue of carbon and climate.
You're within time, but to remind you that.
Yeah, no, I'll wrap up. You know, how can you say that when you're taking vessels from long distances and you're disenfranchising vessels that are close to home? But to summarise, just to get a sense of your plan at European level.
Well, thanks very much, and thank you for your document, which I've received. I haven't had a chance to go through it in detail, but certainly in terms of its capturing the sentiment of the fishing community, I've seen that at first hand. So there's a very clear recognition there that we've got to continue to engage with them, and I'm prepared to do that, as I know you do. I'll be in Rossaville again tomorrow, and there are a number of other harbours that I have to get to that are within our kind of area of control, both Howth and Dunmore East, and I've been to the others. So having engaged with them right from the start, I know that there are many issues of concern to the sector. Some are outside my control, some are within the remit of European level. So my plan there is quite simply to engage to the fullest extent possible, particularly with those coastal member states and with ministers, and I have begun that process. As I said, I've had quite a number of engagement with the Commissioner and with his senior staff. His presence in, and I know Senator Boyle was there, his presence in Castletown Bay was really helpful in terms of informing in the words of the people who were most affected, and he reflected that actually in a conversation again on Monday, how taken by the level of engagement and the understanding of the sector, and it was a good engagement in that they brought their issues rather than their frustration, and he looked at it from a positive perspective. So I'm hoping in whatever ultimate review of the CFP, if there is to be a review, will at least have an opportunity for us to have our voice heard. We will amplify every channel of the member states that we have engagement with, and I've had some experience with our European colleagues through work that I had done previously. So I'm clear about that.
I will
And I
move
just
on to
want
the
then,
next,
for
yeah.
completeness, to add
Very
one other
briefly.
point. I did indicate when I first met all the various interest groups that we would come back with a plan or a way to move forward. So my intention is to appoint a facilitator to work with the sector, an independent facilitator paid for by the department, paid for by the government, but working with the industry to try to identify those issues which can be resolved. There are some outside all of our control. People will reflect on them, but they know that they can't be resolved.
Thank you, Minister.
So Mr.
There
Kieran
might
Mulvey, who's
Minister,
well known in this
there will
House.
be an opportunity.
Apologies.
I understand there will be an opportunity to come back in. Next is Deputy Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, to welcome the Minister and to compliment him on hitting the ground running. He's been most parts of the country. He's been very accessible to all organisations and indeed to members of the House, and that's important. It's important also that he has delegated responsibilities. I recall the days when I had them back in the early noughties, and it was vitally important. And it's great now that we have a committee meeting here that deals with fish and maritime and not the poor relation of agriculture. It was very difficult to get PQs and back, and hopefully the day will come when we'll have the Minister answering the PQs, not as part of agriculture, etc., but as part of the of fisheries. I recall Michel Barnier, who negotiated Brexit, speaking in this House, and he looked me straight in the eye and he said, fisheries will be safe because it will be inextricably linked with trade. And I was foolish enough to accept that. Fisheries has been a disaster as a result of Brexit. And colleagues have outlined what we've lost over the last number of years, the millions, and indeed, and I can't understand how anyone could have welcomed, from a fisheries perspective, the statement after the EU-UK summit, the first summit since Brexit, in the 19th of May. And this is going to continue until 2038, and the losses will have escalated to well up, maybe some said 600, 800 million. It's certainly going to be north of 600 as a result of that. And the Minister did say that we had an input, but I wonder had we an input into that through European negotiators at ministerial level or at official level. I couldn't understand how we could welcome, or how anyone involved in the maritime sector could have welcomed this until 2038, before there would be further. Now, we have lost a considerable amount. And remember that the fishing industry is located along the coast in an area where there's no alternative source of employment. And we're depending largely on this. The Minister himself saw it going into Castletown Bay or Dunmore East or Killybegs, all of those finest vessels tied up. I do believe that there are opportunities for some of those vessels to avail of fishing opportunities in other parts of the world. And I know the Minister has taken a particular interest in this. It may have not worked out this year, but I think there's incumbent on the Department of Marine to assist those vessels who are prepared to try and supplement their income from the reduced quotas of the various fish, whether it be demersal or pelagic, to try and assist and try and to find a way out for those that don't have to deregister and re-register. Much too difficult, I understand, but I think we should smooth that out. So Barnier is the one who has to take a lot of the responsibility for this. Also, we must ensure that there will be additional funding from Europe for the sector as a result of the losses that we have incurred over these last number of years. Minister, I've been there.
You're within time, but to remind you that the Minister
sorry,
still has to respond within this.
I thought we had 5. Sorry. Okay. Just to say, I don't think any of us are so naive as to think that the review of the common fisheries policies is going to resolve all our problems. We all thought that we were going to achieve that, but unfortunately you're fighting against other maritime states there, because if we're to gain, they're to lose.
Thanks very much. Thank Deputy Gallagher, who has vast experience in this area and, like many others on this committee, has been of significant help to me. I come from a small farming background. Fishing was not necessarily my bailiwick, but I'm learning fast because of the expertise of others around this table, across all parties, I might add, and thanks for that. Just before I deal with that, I just wanted to finish off my point to Deputy McLaughlin, which is of benefit to all. In relation to that person that will do the facilitation, Mr. Kieran Mulvey has indicated a willingness to assist in this regard, and I think he's a man of very considerable knowledge and skill that can help to assist us in the first place with facilitation, but to assist us in developing a roadmap for addressing those issues which are within our remit and will assist us in developing that overall future direction that we want to go, and I'll be making further announcements about that in due course. I think I agree with most of, if not all of what you say, Deputy, in relation to your assessment of Brexit and the implications that it has. The way forward is difficult and challenging, as you know from your own experience, but at EU level. And I have to say, it's regularly mentioned to me by even current incumbents of ministerial office and of members of the European Parliament what a contributor you were in your time there, and we thank you for that. Just on just looking at the overall reset which the British government wanted to engage with the European Union, and a lot of that was also done through the Department of Foreign Affairs, but you will see that the response in the British press from British fishermen has been very negative towards their government. So whilst we might feel rightly that it wasn't a wonderful deal from our perspective in the overall Brexit side of things, certainly the British fishermen believe that it was a very negative from their perspective. So I would want to continue to reiterate that the agreement that was reached on the 19th of May is as good or better than I might have expected when I started out on this journey with the kind of briefings.
I might just ask you to draw a line under it there, and we'll move on to the next speaker, and there will be another opportunity. Thank you. The next I have is Senator Boyle.
First of all, welcome, Minister. It's great to have a Minister for the Marine now. It's a long time overdue. And little did I think 4 years ago when I called a public meeting in Killybegs that people from all over Ireland would come to the fishing industry, and that was the start of us getting the ball rolling on this and getting it into the programme for government, and probably the reason I'm sitting here today. So I'm delighted to be here, I'm delighted you're in, and we have to make progress. The first thing that was mentioned already is reform the CFP. We have to hang tough on that. We can't just roll over and die like we did in the last one. Also, too, it was mentioned here about the Iceland deal. I think the last deal that the EC done for us, we ended up with 10,000 tonne of blue whiting. Now, to say that was a disgrace, it was worse than a disgrace. I mean, they're coming in fishing in Irish waters, and we have the largest waters, and we get the weakest crumb of the table just to say, keep you happy. I mean, we can never allow that to happen again. Whoever comes into the waters has to pay the price. That would be my thinking on it, and it has to be a large price. And probably the best, it would have to be paid in mackerel, you know. I mean, these other countries have given themselves large quotas, and then when they have to take a reduction, they're not really taking a reduction. I mean, the dog on the street knows what they're doing. They're inflating the quotas for themselves, and then, they're more than happy, we'll take a reduction to make it look good. But we can't afford no more reductions. We need ours to go up. I mean, to be honest, the like of the Irish seafood, the mackerel, we would need to be sitting around 80 or 90,000 tonne a year to make it viable for people. People's just hanging on here by their fingernails, and I'm one of them, and I know many more, and we're in Killybegs, and I've been around the other ports, and I see it and I feel it from the people, you know. The common fisheries policy is one we really have to hone in here, and we have to push, and particularly too, like I was only out 1 day out, well, 2 days out in Brussels in my life, and I was out there and I could see what we have good people out there now, But like, you can see what the other countries is doing. They have people out there lobbying 24/7. We've nobody.
Senator, just remind you to leave time for the Minister.
That's all right, sorry. No, I know we'll get a chance. But I think it's something we really need to, I know you say we have a facilitator coming on, but we really need somebody out there lobbying on our behalf 24/7 too. And I think it's something that the department should look at, that we'd have somebody out there that's fit to lobby and make it easier on you when you go out then, that you have the pathway walked, and it's only a matter of finalising it, you know. So, thank you.
Thanks very much, Senator, and I note your point in relation to the lobbying. From a government perspective, we have, as you know, a fishing attaché and some consular people in the permanent representative in Brussels, so we're well facilitated in terms of the engagement. However, I take your point in relation to the lobbying effort, which wouldn't generally fall within the remit of the government, but I'm happy to look at the suggestions you might have there and see if we can do more. But I'm conscious of the team that we have, who I've met on a number of occasions, and they're impressive in terms of their capacity to engage with other member states and appraise the department and myself of issues arising and future opportunities. I am conscious, though, that other countries do have, through perhaps funded through the industry, a significant lobbying exercise there, and as I said, we can engage with that afterwards. Your assessment is, I think, as others, and I don't disagree with you, the impact that has happened as a result of Brexit, and you know through your own business the impact that it has. But I would also, I think it's worth reflecting again, that I do get a sense of resilience in the industry, that notwithstanding the significant challenges, notwithstanding the significant losses, there's a group of people, men and women, who are prepared to try to reorient their business and reorient this industry in a manner that will provide for those coastal communities. And I and the department and the government will absolutely want to work. With that and ensure that we leave a viable business behind, and that we have a plan-led approach to it. Thank you.
Could I come back for 1 second?
You have 15 seconds.
Like Minister, I was out there, we met with the reps out there, and the first thing he said to me, you've only lost 26%. I mean, listen here, let's call a spade a spade. If we have somebody going on negotiation for us that says, oh, you only lost 26%, where are we going to be in the next negotiations?
You know,
but I can assure you from my... Yeah,
Minister,
maybe I'll come back afterwards. Yeah, thanks,
rhetorical question as much as anything, I think. Gurmagad, next we have Deputy Cahill.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I'd like to welcome our Minister here this morning and congratulate you again, Minister. And you've impressed me very much to date, and I wish you well going forward. And you're well on top of your brief, and that's very important. A number of questions. When do you believe Inshore, or do you believe Inshore should get a fairer share of the pelagic quota, as they now are over 90% of the fleet? When will Inshore bluefin quotas be introduced? Any update on the Northwest Herring Committee? Every Inshore fisherman, I understand, has lost up to 10,000 each since 2020 due to COVID, Brexit, the war in Ukraine, and that's, I'm informed that that's not just, that's crewmen, not to mind the skippers and owners, etc. Can financial aid be provided as a matter of priority so that they can continue in business as primary producers? I wish to raise something that's, as you're well aware, is very close to my heart, the matter of pier trawling. And we have a school down in Kenmare and in South Kerry, Skull in Verskena, and the students there did a massive campaign. This is a huge issue all along our coast, and especially in Kenmare Bay and Dingle Bay. When I'm at home, I see it on a regular basis, pier trawling outside my own home in Raspa. And if we don't act now, there's going to be untold damage, irreparable damage done. you know, and it's so important that we support future generations, to be honest. The sprat has been wiped out, and it's not just affecting all other species, but it's affecting, you know, the small fisherman, the man with the rod. It's affecting the guy with the small boat, and indeed the small trawlers, the medium-sized trawlers. In that regard, can I ask, you know, when will the ban come in? When will the 6 mile limit be introduced? Do you believe, or do the department believe and support the introduction of the 6 mile radius? I wanted to, I suppose, emphasise the importance of our seafood industry, and Ireland can pride itself in how successful we are.
Deputy, just a reminder to leave some time for the Minister to respond.
Okay, and just in my own county, there's some great companies, Quinlan's Fish in Grenard, Carsaween. They've shops all over Kerry, Limerick and Cork. You have, in my own parish, there's a small business but a very successful, thriving business, Glimbest Shellfish. You have Cremon Seafood down the road in Cremon. Cremon was the third largest exporter of mussels at once upon a time, and ISIS is big business in the area. You have Daly's Seafood, and on the menu here in the Dáil, Chair, you'll get Daly's smoked salmon.
Deputy, could I ask you to just to ensure that you, I know you want to mention a number of places, but if you wouldn't mind leaving the Minister an opportunity to answer several of your questions.
Just the very last matter, the issue of aquaculture licences. They're going on and on for years, and livelihoods are at stake here. And I would ask the Minister, to you and your officials, to get there's cases there that are waiting to apply for European funding, and they can't because the licences aren't being renewed.
Deputy,
or processed.
it is my third time now. The Minister won't be able to respond because
thanks very much, Deputy, and just to thank you for your ongoing engagement with me since my appointment. I think the number of queries and questions that you have submitted is an indication of your connection to the seafood sector and to the fishing sector generally, and in particular to the inshore fishermen, which I know are important. And I had an opportunity to visit with you and meet with Quinlan's and others who are in that sector. Just in relation to the pair trawling, I had an opportunity to reflect on this earlier. There is a process in place underway at the minute, and I don't want to in any way impinge on the outcome of that. So other than what I can say to you is that the government is committed to addressing the issues that you raise. The previous minister began a consultation process last year. There was over 5,000 submissions. I and the department have to go through those in detail so that whatever decision we ultimately take is proportionate and is based on science and facts. And I intend or expect to be able to make a decision on some possible options in that area by the summer. So I don't want to sort of second guess what that might be at this stage, other than that I'm committed to making a decision in the interest of all at the earliest possible opportunity.
Thank you, Minister. I'll bring Deputy Clear in at this point. Yep, floor is yours. And just to remind once again that the 5 minutes includes the questions and the responses.
Thank you very much, Chair. And first of all, Minister Dooley, just to congratulate you on your new role in this very new ministry, and I think it's fantastic to see. And I've spoken to a lot of stakeholders in the industry, and the feedback on yourself is that you're prepared to roll your sleeves up and get stuck in and get involved, and to actually have a minister like yourself that's going out to communities right around the country, I think is just fantastic. So fair play to you in terms of that. And I think needs to be acknowledged as well from a governmental perspective, to have a specific committee on this topic, I think is fantastic. Hasn't been there before. I know Pat Cope said it earlier, but it really has to be acknowledged. So to have a specific committee and a specific minister dedicated to marine, I think is huge and shows the commitment this government has to the marine. I'll be very brief in terms of my question. I have two questions, Minister. I'll throw them all in one, and I'd like to hear from you really on it. And I suppose the first one is just in relation to the extension of the post-trade agreement, and obviously we know it's worth 1.25 billion to the economy, and there's 17,000 jobs affected. But what would be the 2 or 3 biggest impact that you'd see this trade agreement having on the fisheries and seafood sector? Is question number 1. And question number 2, if you'll indulge me, is just you might talk to me a little bit about the government's offshore renewable strategy. I think this is an area that there's huge potential in, and I'd just like to get your remarks on that as well, please. Thanks, Chair.
So, okay, thanks very much, Deputy. Just in terms of the impact of the reset agreement, for the want of a better word, what it does to the sector, it gives certainty in terms of what the operators have in terms of their investment strategy. What we were facing into was the potential for further loss of quota, and having that having to be addressed on a multi-annual basis, and that does not assist operators within the sector in financing their projects or their business over the years ahead. So it gives certainty. It also recognises, of course, that the loss of quota is still significant, and we talked about that earlier, and I don't want to underestimate that in any way, and the pressure that it has put on the sector. But what it does give is certainty now as we progress. In relation to the offshore renewable side, we have very significant commitments to achieve our decarbonisation targets by 2030 and onwards to 2050. There's already some activity in that space, and we hope by 2030 to be a long ways towards achieving a further 5 gigawatts of electricity from offshore renewables, principally offshore wind. Those targets are exacting, but we're progressing well on it. We have a further commitment then by 2040 to have a further 15 to 18 megawatts, bringing a total of 20 gigawatts offshore by 2040. That's really important from 2 aspects. One, from decarbonising our grid, our electricity grid, and also further decarbonising our economy generally, so that we're moving away from fossil fuels. And in doing so, our demand for electricity will grow significantly. At the minute, I think we use about 6 gigawatts of electricity on the island of Ireland. By 2030, we're hoping to have another 5 of that offshore. Some of the onshore activity is already there. So we do want to continue to progress that. And there are real opportunities for coastal communities in providing, through some of the very bigger ports, for sort of the main work, but then there will be maintenance, ongoing maintenance activity that can take place from smaller harbours. So there's significant opportunities in the years ahead. Government is committed through the national designated marine area plans, which the legislation is already there in the Planning Act of 2021. There's been a successful area designated off the south-east coast, and hasn't been judicially reviewed, so that was a positive outcome in terms of the regulatory approach that was taken. And we're now moving that forward, and we'll be making a further statement shortly on the details of how we intend to progress that on a national basis. And we're hoping by the end of 2027 to have a national DMAP which will identify other sites around the coastline that are suitable for both fixed and floating offshore wind opportunities. So we see that as a very significant enabler of local communities. It isn't going to be without its challenge, because these are shared spaces. There's transport, there's leisure, there's fishing, and now you introduce offshore renewables, and there's potential for conflict. Part of the role that I've been given is to try to ease that insofar as we can between the competing interests of the Department of Fisheries on the one hand, and the marine aspect, marine planning, but also marine environment in terms of the marine protected areas that we have to put in place as well. So it's challenging, it's exciting, and it has a huge potential to assist us in decarbonising our economic activity. And we have an abundance of wind offshore that other countries, quite frankly, don't have. So depending on grid development over the coming years, we have the potential to have an impact in exporting electricity from that source into a European grid. We have some interconnection at the minute, particularly through the Celtic interconnector, but we've that would have to be strengthened and expanded. But then there are also opportunities being developed and looked at about through electrolysis, converting that potential abundance of electricity into hydrogen and ammonia. And we all recognise that aviation is a contributor to
Minister,
climate change.
I might just ask you to wrap on that, and we will have an opportunity. The meeting after next of this committee will be looking at offshore renewable energies.
Okay.
Given that all our members have already had a first opportunity to speak, I have a number of questions that I would like to put to you, Minister. And as Deputy McLaughlin has already mentioned, yesterday he and I and our party launched that document, and it makes for very depressing reading when we're looking at a sector that many of us are involved in, that has sustained our coastal communities for a very long time. And some of those point to a real distrust of government and of the approach of government, successive governments over many years, to prioritise the sector, to vindicate the interests of coastal communities, to stand up for the industry at European level and elsewhere. And taken as a whole, if I were to distill it down to just a few words, there seems to be a problem with culture and attitudes at the heart of government. And this isn't something that is new. It's not something that has cropped up recently, but it seems to be there at the heart of government when it comes to the fishing sector. And I know you've heard that feedback from the communities and industry already. The events, I suppose, of recent weeks with the conclusion of the negotiations on this trade agreement, or the locking in of the provisions of the trade agreement for many years to come, underscores that, I believe. It shows the lack of interest and disregard at European level for the Irish fishing industry and the coastal communities, these marginal communities that it sustains. Out of the Commission's extremely long statement on the overall agreement, there was only 4 lines of text relating to sea fisheries in its entirety, and nothing specific about Ireland. But then there is also the question that is rightly asked, and I think Deputy McLaughlin alluded to it. Well, what is the dividend here for the Irish fishing industry? Where is the recognition that we are carrying the burden of this again? And I note your own statement at the time, Minister, welcomed the certainty that it gave. But when the industry has been hemorrhaging 44 million euros worth of fish every year under this agreement, and is likely to hemorrhage 800 million over the lifetime of the agreement, that is certainty, sure, but the industry certainly knows it's screwed, is the way I would put it, to be honest, and that's the way it has been termed to me. So my question, Minister, is what can we do to leverage the fact that we are carrying this burden at European level as we run into the December Council and quota negotiations, and also to look for some additional funding? I note that the Brexit, the Stability Fund did provide 31 million for ports and harbours. Now I would have some questions about how that was directed and how accessible that was to local authorities in particular to access for dredging and other works. But how can we leverage the fact that we're under this burden now to do best for the industry and for the coastal communities?
Thanks very much, Chairperson. Just your 2 specific questions, and what can we do now based on a recognition of the difficulties that the sector faces at European level. I think the first level of engagement, having met with the Commissioner and then having had him come and meet the industry, was a really positive first step. The fact that it's central in his mind as to the impact that it has and that continues to have is, I think, part of it. I think the work that I will be doing over the coming months throughout the summer in meeting with counterparts at European level, a number of that I've already met in my attendance at council meetings, but I'm also organising bilaterals where I will visit other member states. Also, in addition to what impact that might have in terms of the council meeting, it's also part of a roadshow that the government is encouraging all ministers to engage in to assist with our development of our programme for the presidency, which will take place in the second half of 2026. So that's important work. The work of this committee is important too, and I did when we had a a briefing session with you, I did encourage the committee to go to Brussels and meet with various interested parties, and it feeds into what Senator Boyle was saying as well in terms of lobbying. You too, and I don't mean this in a facetious way, you too have a role in that in terms of being present both in Strasbourg and in Brussels on occasion with delegations to meet with counterparts at European level and meet with members of the European Parliament. So it helps to highlight, continue to highlight the issues that we face. On the additional funding and in relation to funding for harbours, I think this year we've about 4 million for specific harbours outside our remit or control. There was 27 million overall. Some of that was funding to the state-owned harbours, but there was 4.1 or 4.2 million, which Minister Hayden and I announced earlier this year, which was then attributed to the various different applications. Applications come from local authorities. They're flagged in advance. We provide 80% funding for shovel-ready projects. So the local authority has to have done some of their own work in terms of the environmental impact studies and all of that. We don't fund that aspect. We just fund projects that are ready to go. So the local authority have to have made some headway in that regard.
And Minister, you and I know we've discussed this previously, and I think we'll have to come back to it at a future committee meeting, because I think that is out of kilter with the way other government departments fund other local authority projects where there is money for development. But we have a number, we've about 15 minutes left in this item with the Minister, so I'll open it up to the floor, and I would just remind members that we'll go for 5 minutes, but that has to include some time for the Minister to respond. That's only 15 minutes. Okay. So, Deputy McLaughlin has indicated. Does anybody else want to just indicate at this point? Okay. Deputy Cal and Senator Boyle from Ireland.
Thanks very much, Cahirla. Minister, just want to get a sense. So obviously we're going to have various sectors represented here today in the next session, islands, inshore, offshore, and just want to get your latest perspectives on the issue of the 6 Mile. I know you're reviewing that, and there has been a number of court cases that have held back the intent of the previous government. Just to get your latest perspectives on that, and then in terms of the issue of this natural resource that we have around our coast, fishing and shellfish. I mean, would you have a view that resource that we've never really fully developed, that it is protected as a resource for the Irish people under the Irish Constitution? Like so I just want to get your thoughts on those two issues. Okay, thanks.
Thanks very much. So, Deputy, just on the Inside 6, which we talk about in terms of the changes, there's different terms used, the Inside 6, brat fishing or pair trawling. It's a position of the government going back to 2019 where a decision was taken, a policy position was taken, and it was challenged in the courts on a very technical point. And the position fell against the government on that very technical point. So what I want to do, I have to go back again, or the government had to go back again in 2024 and begin that consultation process. It achieved a very significant number of submissions, over 5,000. In order to have, when you have a process like that in place, you've got to go through that meticulously on the basis of for the potential of challenges that might take place at a later stage. So I'm not in a position to make any pronouncement on what the ultimate decision might be until I have gone through all that process. But we're at a particular point in that journey that I'm hopeful we can make our position known over the course of the summer. The sooner the better from my perspective, because I know that across all the areas people are interested from both sides. So I want to be judicious in the approach that we take, but I want to be resolute that we need to reach a final position here, and I'm committed to working through that. We just had discussions at ministerial level about it just yesterday, so we will continue to progress that. I'm conscious of the impact that it's having on all sides, so we do want to bring that to a conclusion. Just on the natural resource, I think we have a number of natural resources in our maritime area that are of huge importance to coastal communities. For sure, fishing and shellfish is a very significant resource. I'm also conscious that we've got to protect it in every way. We have to protect it against overfishing. We have to protect it against other opportunities that are there now that emerge with the potential for offshore renewables. And I'm also conscious that even though the value of aquaculture has increased significantly in recent years, the volume has dropped. And that's because principally the value of organic Irish salmon has grown significantly. But I do think, notwithstanding, and we talked about the licensing issues earlier, notwithstanding the challenges around issuance of licence and all the process there, there's an opportunity there too that I think we can work greater on in terms of the potential benefit that will have to coastal communities. Recently, when I attended a conference on ocean conference in Korea, I took the opportunity to look at a project that they're developing there, which is effectively an onshore fish farm. Now, it's not commercially viable just yet. It's a pilot project that they're undertaking in close proximity to the sea, but yet resourced from groundwater rather than the seas, and there might be some potential benefits there. I know there are significant costs associated with the energy, but in looking to the future and the abundance of offshore energy, there may be some potential there. It's very early stages, but it's one which I want to interrogate. If it's possible to do in other parts of the world, we should be looking at it here. So that ecosystem that exists off our coastline is hugely important for future of those coastal communities. And it may be reflecting what the chairman said earlier. Over the passage of time, perhaps attention has been focused elsewhere. I think the government are now very clearly committed to trying to exploit those resources to the benefit of those communities, but to do so in a manner that's sustainable and is protected for future generations. And those are my writing instructions from the government.
Deputy Cahill is next. And so before you begin, Deputy Cahill, a number of people have indicated, and we only have about 10 minutes left in the session.
Maybe to save Deputy Cahill, I could answer the questions that I didn't get to answer last, so I'll save him the time and I'll maybe just answer them for you.
Is that okay with you, Deputy Cahill? Yeah, okay.
Thanks very much.
Try and keep it to 3 minutes.
So you talked about the pair trawling, and I've already addressed that a number of times, and you were there for that. Bluefin tuna, Ireland doesn't have a quota for bluefin tuna because, for historical reasons, we didn't have that species within our waters. But it was a point that was reflected by a number of people when we met the Commissioner, and interestingly enough, it seems to have stuck in his mind because he mentioned it again when we met earlier this week, that because of climate change, perhaps, but certainly migratory patterns of fish stock and species is changing. Waters are warming. There's negative impact to that too, but it does see species coming into our waters. And previous ministers, and I certainly won't be found wanting in fighting for a share of that. Now look, as Deputy Gallagher has identified, for us to gain quota, somebody has to lose. Now, even when species move from waters, and where there are countries who don't fish their entire quota, they're very slow to give up quota. So that, I don't want to underestimate the challenge that we'll face in that regard, but I can assure you we will do everything possible to push for that. And just having the Commissioner on side of itself won't be enough, because it'll be a decision of Member States at those various different negotiation agreements. Now, on the aquaculture licence, I mentioned aquaculture as an opportunity, but it'll only be an opportunity if we can bring some semblance of hastiness to the issuance of licence, and even where we have situations where licence have to be renewed after 10 years. Many of them, under a provision that's there, are allowed to still operate while their licence is under review. They're gone to 15 and 16 years. So for another 10, and there's only 4 left in years left in that. So I do want to do a piece of work on this, and I'll come back to the committee in due course with it. But it's something that's not working at the minute from my perspective. And department officials and myself have discussed this already. I'm conscious of it from the people who are involved in aquaculture, who raise it regularly. And I think what we'd ultimately like, if we can get the processing right, I'd ultimately like to go to a situation where we can issue 20-year licences. And again, that gives, I say that guardedly because I haven't advanced all the aspects to it, but I think you have to give certainty to people and businesses who are investing in this area. And if we as a state believe in what they're producing, and we do, then we have to be of assistance in terms of the delivery. It will be challenged, for no doubt, like any licences where people believe a certain practice runs contrary to what they would like to see there. It will be challenged in the courts. So none of this is for the want of effort. It's just how we put in place the regulatory and legal framework and primary legislation, if necessary, to give certainty to those who will take decisions at a later stage.
Can I just thank the Minister for his detailed response, and I can't emphasise strongly enough the importance of expediting the processing of aquaculture licences. Just to thank you as well, Minister, for your announcement earlier this year for the smaller piers. That funding was, you know, the likes of Kilmacalog and County Kerry, and the importance of Dingle Harbour and the investment there. Okay, thank you.
Deputy Gallagher to 2 minutes.
I'm sorry I missed your contribution in relation to aquaculture, but there are no quotas when it comes to aquaculture, and there's the opportunities that we should be. Those are the opportunities that we should be taking, and it's important, Minister, that a one-stop shop would be established when it comes to aquaculture processing. You do not, as far as I understand, have it in your total remit to process that, an application from A to Z, to other interested, and maybe it's something you could consider and let us have your views at a future meeting.
Yeah, there are a number of other ministers that have interest. In fact, I know it's an issue at the minute in terms of getting my delegated responsibilities between the two departments, that one might impact on the other because of the capacity to review decisions that are taken by me on the one hand and the potential implications that might have. So we'll certainly look at that and see if there's a methodology in place as part of that overall review, and maybe what we could do in due course is when we have a plan in place, or maybe the bones of a plan, we can come back before the committee and get your interest in and your ideas on that particular element.
Okay.
Senator Budd.
Just a few wee things. As you said, we were down in Castletown and the Commissioner was there. And I do believe the Commissioner is really getting involved in these new species that's coming into Irish waters because of global warming. Is there any way we could conduct a review to see what's coming into Irish waters to try and be ahead of the posse? And also, you did mention the bluefin tuna there. I think the tuna would be a good help to our small fishermen. Really, if they could get maybe 2 or 3 tags for the year, it would be a massive help to a small man with a boat that's out trying to fish crabs and lobsters. And also, just Minister, when you are here, what are the kind of the plans for the small fisherman? You know, at the end of the day, he's just living on crumbs too. Off the table. So, I think he's a person that needs to be taken into a plan moving forward here too, because if we're going to keep our coastal communities alive, we need the small man involved too.
Yeah, thanks very much. So Senator, the issue in terms of understanding of the migratory flows and patterns of certain species into our waters would be handled in the first instance by the Marine Institute, which falls under the remit of the department in the area that I have responsibility for. And I've visited with them in recent times, and I'm in regular contact, and I have to say they really are an outstanding operation, and they do some amazing work in capturing that data. So we won't be found wanting in terms of having access to knowledge when it comes to fighting our corner for that. But that will be part of an overall negotiation at Brussels level, and it's a challenge for sure, because, as I said, for us to get quota that we didn't have, somebody else has to give way. And look, I do understand the pressures that are under, particularly the inshore fishermen and women and the small operations, a bit like small farming, which I understand very well, having grown up on one. and the implications that that has. There was, to the best of my knowledge, and I'll have to just make sure that I'm correct here, and I'm sure Sinead will correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a previous policy position taken about reallocating or adjusting quotas between certain sectors within the Irish area, and that was judicially challenged. There was a judicial review on that, and to the best of my knowledge is still in the courts. So to take share, again, within our own area between the bigger and the smaller fleets is not straightforward, and when the department or I or any future or previous minister, certainly in the case of the previous minister, that was challenged, and that, you know, so that makes it difficult for me at the moment to move forward with a new plan in that regard if we were minded to do it based on observations or discussions, because it would be challenged. The one that was already there is still being challenged in the court. So it's not just a matter of a stroke of a pen for I or for the government to reallocate. It has to follow a process, and it's open to challenge, and that's where that lies.
Minister, thank you, Senator. Minister, on behalf of the committee, I want to thank you and your officials for attending here today. It's the first time, but it certainly won't be the last time. And there are, as you heard today, there's a whole wide range of issues that we wish to discuss with you and tease out in more detail and in length. But I thank you for your contributions today, to your officials who have accompanied you today, and your contribution to the meeting. We're now going to suspend the meeting to allow the next witnesses enter the room and get set up. So we'll suspend the meeting at this point. Just read a brief statement. We're now back in public session, and I'm required to read a short statement on privilege for the benefit of our witnesses. Witnesses. We are in public session? Okay. Super. So witnesses giving evidence from within the parliamentary precincts are protected by absolute privilege in respect of the evidence to give to a committee. This means that a witness has a full defence in any defamation action for anything said at a committee meeting. However, witnesses are expected not to abuse this privilege and may be directed to cease giving evidence on the issue, on an issue at the Chair's direction. Witnesses should follow the direction of the Chair in this regard and are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that, as is reasonable, no adverse commentary should be made against an identifiable third person or entity. Witnesses who are to give evidence from a location outside the parliamentary precincts, so those joining us on MS Teams, are asked to note that they may not benefit from the same level of immunity from legal proceedings as a witness giving evidence from within the parliamentary precincts, and may consider it appropriate to take their own legal advice on the matter. Privilege against defamation does not apply to the publication by you, outside of the proceedings held by the committee, of any matters arising from the proceedings. So, with that said, I would like to welcome our witnesses and thank you for attending here at the committee to discuss this pressing issue. We have Mr. Cormac Burke, Chairman of the Irish Fishing and Seafood Alliance. We have Mr. Enda Keneally, Vice Chair of the Irish Islands Marine Resource Organisation, joining us remotely. And we have Mr. Brendan Byrne of the Seafood Alliance and also Irish Fish Producers and Exporters Association, and Mr. John Lynch, Seafood Ireland Alliance, Irish South and East Fish Producers Organisation. So witnesses' opening statements have been already forwarded to the members, and as the time for this discussion is fairly limited, I won't ask you to give the full statement, but maybe to give a brief 2-minute synopsis on it, and then we'll proceed to a questions and answer session. And for the benefit of members, I'll ask you to indicate, once we begin that question and answer session, I'll ask you to indicate, and we'll do the same practice we had previously where you ask the question and there's 5 minutes, but within that 5 minutes we also need to get a response. So I'll just ask you to bear that in mind when framing your questions. So we'll start with you, also Keneally, Erlina and MS Teams, and so you've 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And members of the committee. I'll be brief. The Irish Islands Marine Resource Organisation, EMRO, is an offshore islands-based organisation representing members from Donegal, Mayo, Galway and Cork. EMRO is a recognised EU producer organisation since February 21. We're affiliated to the Low Impact Fishers of Europe, COA, Lila here in the Irish Islands Federation. Our members are predominantly small-scale, low-impact operators fishing from small boats using local crews and supporting our island communities. The offshore islands are very dependent on fishing, and over 6% of the Irish national fleet is made up of island boats, considering that's 0.03% of the population of Ireland. It's kind of important. The importance of islands has been recognised at European level in the Common Fisheries Policy and the recently published European Oceans Pact. To date, this vision has not been delivered at a national level. The Trade and Cooperation Agreement is between the EU and the UK, now a third country since Brexit, and governs a lot of fisheries policy. The small-scale fleet segment is largely invisible in the agreement, despite their social importance and low environmental impact, considering the small proportion of the overall fishing opportunities allocated to them. Negotiations are handled by Europe, and Ireland has limited input into the final outcome. The recent TCA has a long time frame, so it's essential that implementation is flexible so it can deliver on the aims of the agreement, particularly for the next generation of fishermen and women and island and coastal communities. Brexit has affected all Irish fleet segments. The small-scale and inshore fleet segments did not benefit from the Brexit Adjustment Reserve, the BAR Fund, as these measures were moved to the national exchequer. This had the negative consequence of falling under the very limited de minimis funding rule for fisheries, and which MRO opposed at the time.
Thank you, Mr. Keneally. We're just at time there. I'm not sure if you can see it on your screen. We have timers here in the room, and I just ask witnesses and members to be cognizant of them. They're in red around here, but thank you for that 2-minute synopsis. I'll move to Mr. Cormac Burke.
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. Thanks to the members of the committee. I'll just give you an abbreviated version of the opening statement that I submitted already. I've just picked out a few of the main points. The Commission claims this agreement offers stability, but it does nothing for Ireland, who have lost the chance of negotiating back any of the quota submitted to the UK during Brexit. The deal shows the Commission's failure to protect Ireland's fishing sector, and that it appears there is no intention to save Ireland from the common fisheries policy, which benefits EU nations to harvest Irish waters while forcing Irish fishermen to survive on 14% of the total EU quota in Irish waters. At this stage, Irish fishermen feel their industry has reached a point of no return unless there's a radical overhaul of the system. And a couple of brief examples include every time the inshore sector attempts to diversify into a fishery to take pressure off the crab resource, then that fishery is closed due to a regulation or a coincidental scientific advice that seems to suit the EU Commission narrative at that time. A demersal sector example exists in South East Ireland, where Irish vessels restricted by EU quotas to just a few kilos of Dover sole per month, while Belgian vessels fishing the same Irish waters are allowed several tonnes. This has incredibly resulted in Belgian fishing companies building new vessels purely for this lucrative situation, while the Irish vessels are going bankrupt. And the third example, the pelagic fleet has seen quotas alarmingly reduced, and since the Commission deemed that there no longer be Irish waters but consider them an EU shared resource, they carry out deals with Norway without much consultation with Ireland to permit the catching of hundreds of thousands of tonnes of Irish blue whiting, while Ireland's allowance is just 60,000 tonnes. Ireland was impacted disproportionately by the Brexit deal, losing 43 million worth of quota. But many people don't realise that reportedly, according to Eurostat, some 215 billion has been taken from Irish waters since we joined the EU in 1973.
Mr. Burke, thank you for that. I'll now ask Mr. Brennan Byrne.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. First of all, to deal with the issue before us, the extension to the trade agreement, while it gives us 12 years of certainty, and we have to look at that in the context of what we witnessed in the UK for the last 8 years with the turbulence of the various governments from May to Truss to Johnson. That certainty is welcomed by the sector. We welcome that. But the historic fact is still there, that the losses imposed on Ireland in 2020 are really hurting the sector right across the board. The sector I represent, the processing sector, at present has lost 240 million euros of fishing opportunity. That's manifesting itself with reduced working hours, reduced employment opportunity in the various factories across the board. While there are others that said the BAR fund, the Brexit Adjustment Fund, alleviated that, we need to be realistic when we do an analysis of that. Whilst we did get 30.4 million euros in funding for capital investment, the sector had to invest 110 million of their own money through mortgages and loans in order to draw down that 30.4. So there was a lot of risk on the part of the sector. The other scheme that was to benefit this sector was the Brexit Transition Fund. And I challenge anyone here to have a look at that scheme. It was a disaster from beginning to end. So it missed the opportunity to help the sector. So, and then you bear in mind 213 million of the BAR fund was sent back to the EU at a time when the sector is crying out for support. So we are in a situation where global demand for fish is high, and we can sell multiple amounts of fish than what we're processing, but it's not available to us. The 12-year extension for the sector that I represent, will cost us €1 billion. That is what this 12-year extension. That is shared over 82 fish processing units. Do the ratio. That is a severe hit for our sector. That is the certainty that I am dealing with and the factory owners and the processors owners are dealing with. So we need to evaluate the past 5 years, and we need to do a prospectus on what the next 12 years really mean in real terms. So I'm now conscious that I'm over time, so I'll revert back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. And Mr. Lynch.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. We in the Irish South and East Fish Producers Organisation, we recognise the stability that the the new trade and cooperation agreement with the UK has given us, and it gives a certainty to businesses and for people that intend to make investments in the future, which is at this stage is very important. We also recognise and are confident in that there's been a realignment of the SPS, the phyto and phytosanitary regulation, and we do hope that this will allow us to re-establish the land bridge and re-establish the landing of live shellfish into the UK for transport back into Ireland as a European Union member state for onward processing. That was stopped post the initial Brexit, and I made a lot of statements about it over the intervening 5 years. So it is encouraging for us to see that sanitary regulations being realigned, and we hope that it can happen as soon as possible. In saying that, we did have massive losses in the trade and cooperation agreement, amounting to 43 million euros of quota annually being transferred from Ireland to the UK as part of the TCA agreement. That is ongoing now for the next 12 years after next year, up to 2038 in June. And we see that as a huge loss, a loss for the catching sector, which runs up to almost 800 million. And indeed, in NEFROPS, where we transferred 14% of our NEFROPS quota to the UK as part of that agreement, that will amount to almost 50 million has amounted to almost 50 million over the 5 years to date. So that will continue, and those losses will continue. As my colleague said, that the bar funding did in some way give a temporary assistance to alleviate some of the financial losses, but it really hasn't helped the industry to readjust to the new reality. And that new reality is that the Irish fishing industry is now struggling because of consolidation, where we decommissioned almost 6,000 tonnes of vessels, so 39 vessels in all were decommissioned. And that has consolidated the industry to a point where it really is struggling to support itself. It's struggling to support the service industry, and it's struggling to keep its processors supplied. That is causing huge issues all around the industry, all at a time when we're starting to face into the reality of having to rebuild our fleet for the energy transition into the future. I'll stop at that time.
Thanks, Mr. Lynch. So we'll open it up to questions and answers, and I go to Deputy Gallagher in the first instance, Senator Boyle then, and Deputy Ward.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'm committed. I'm watching the clock to an interview ready in the Gulf like that. But to welcome those who are with us this morning, both here in person and online, giving an overview of the implications of the EU-UK agreement on the 19th of May. And of course, that was heralded as being a very welcome agreement by all except the fishing sector. Fishing sector has a great impact on the sector, and while we were told early in the day that the British fishing sector saw it as a negative, but the converse of that was that it should be a positive. It's not a positive for us, and has been outlined by the spokespersons, the amount that we have lost to date, and that it will be up to 1 million by 2038. That's going to have devastating implications for the industry. The Brexit Adjustment Fund, which was meant to be of assistance, capital of 30 million, but remembering that does not it's not sufficient. 110 million had to be provided by matching funds by the sector, and that's an indication of the type of sector. Many of those in the fishing sector are investing without any assistance whatsoever. But correct me if I'm wrong, Chairman, or Brendan Byrne, that 230 million was returned to Europe or something of that nature, and that wasn't taken advantage of. That's questions not for Europe, that's questions for the Irish government and the Irish Department, and we'll be pursuing those vigorously at our next meeting. But the UK, and as I said earlier, that I point a finger at Michel Barnier, who told me very clearly that Brexit would not have any implications for the fishing sector because trade and fish would be inextricably linked, but that didn't happen. We have lost as a result of that. And to suggest now that the common fisheries policy may right all our wrongs, I'm around too long to know that since the very first day there's been no changes in the common fisheries policy because the cake has been to be divided, and if we're to get an extra 2 or 3%, others will oppose that vigorously, and we don't have the power then, and we don't have the voting strength at the Council of Ministers. But by the same token, I do believe that Minister Dooley is totally committed. He hit the ground running, he's learning quickly, and he will work closely with us to try and do his utmost to support the sector and try to reverse all of the wrongs that have been done. Thank you.
Do I take it that question was directed for Mr. Byrne?
Well, yeah.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Yes, I can confirm the amount that was returned was 213 million. That's what we were told at the last two meetings that this issue was addressed. Deputy Gallagher is 100% correct. The real impacts and the accumulative impacts of the quota transfers resulting from the TCA are being felt year on year. And we can see that from the catching sector and the representatives here. The profitability in the catching sector is down 82%. In our sector, the processing sector, at least 50% of the factories are working less time. At least 30 to 40% of the factories no longer are profitable, making considerable losses. And all those challenges are a direct result of having lost 26% of the value of our quota, 26% of the value of our quota in order for the TCA to be agreed. That also translated into Ireland contributed 40% of the volumetric value of the overall TCA deal for all of Europe. One member state contributed 40%, whereas the other 8 contributed the 60. It's an easy maths equation when you look at it. We have to be fair and objective. Ireland got a severe and disproportionate hit as a result of this. Whilst the 12-year certainty is welcomed by us, we do welcome that, but it also confirms 12 years of further losses unless we can do things differently. Thanks, Chairperson.
Okay, next I have Senator Boyle, and again, it's 5 minutes. That includes the response, and I'd ask you maybe to direct the question to one of our witnesses in particular, if possible.
Well, first of all, boys, congratulations. It's great to see you here. Normally I'd be with yours over there, Stuffer sitting over here. But I'm so glad you're here. You're representing your industry, the same with the people on the Zooms. It's long overdue. We should have had this 10, 15 years ago, and maybe the industry wouldn't be in the mess there's in now. But just a couple of questions, just put out vaguely to, Brendan, you said there we set back 213 million in fund. And is it the government that was responsible for sending that back, or was it Europe? That's just one question. I'll let you answer then. And the other one is, and it was talked about here in the meeting earlier today, the Minister said that the fishing people of Ireland is resilient, which I know we are. Like when you think where we started off 4 years ago and where we've come to now, we have no, what I would say, visible gains, but we are gaining ground around Ireland and through the coastal communities. But can you see out there in the future, is there any place that we can make wee ones to secure the small fisherman and the big fisherman moving forward, and deals that can be made with Europe, and say, just like we talked about earlier on, Icelandic deals? Can we score a one there that's going to help the industry stay alive and try and keep going? So it's just open to the three, whichever wants to come back to answer. Thank you.
That I meant to say in the first reading, and it was a line I have here: if anyone in Irish politics needed an explanation as to what the fisheries problem is for Ireland, the simple answer that the common fisheries policy continues to benefit not those closest to the resource, but those closest to Brussels. And that answers a lot of the questions that are asked here today. Sorry, Brendan, I'll let you continue.
Yeah, thanks, Manus, for the question. There's several aspects to this. You know, we obviously we are looking at what can be done to improve the situation in the fishing industry and in the seafood industry as a whole. I suppose an item high on the agenda at the moment is them ongoing negotiations with Iceland, and we think that the maximum value for Ireland should be extracted from those negotiations. This is a way of partially balancing rebalancing the losses that were made in Brexit, and that is in particular into the pelagic sector. In the demersal sector, our only opportunity now that we have maintained the same level of quota transfer to the UK and the TCA. Our only opportunity, or one of our main opportunities, is the ongoing evaluation of the CFP, which we are asking our representatives, our minister and our government to push for a reform or some reforms to be made within that CFP. So within that CFP, we would like to see reforms to the Hague preferences. We'd like to see reforms to underutilised quota. You know, there's several things within that mechanism that we would like to see reformed, and we would really like to see our Hague preferences that were hard fought for Ireland in the past being given a stronger legal basis within that CFP, because currently we have to go annually and fight for those Hague preferences. And I think there was reference made to it in one of the earlier statements that sole in a particular area in the Celtic Sea, 7FG, we are particularly deficient in quota for that stock. And we do have a Hague preference in that stock, but we have never managed to invoke it. And there is an issue with us trying to invoke that with the Commission annually at December Council.
Thank you, Mr.
We'd
Lynch.
like to see that given a stronger legal basis. Thank you.
Mr. Keneally is indicating here online that might have been missed, so I'll invite Mr. Keneally in at this point.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few brief points going forward from our perspective. We've been recognised as a producer organisation, but there's no funding available as in line with EU policy. So we are short of basic infrastructure. If you look at it, it's the small-scale fleet that's the basis of everything. Everyone starts off fishing on small boats in the coast, and look at the state of us we're shoving on and getting old. So we need a practical system of facilitating generational renewal, like a fishery apprentice scheme or something like that. A more nuanced approach to scientific thing. Advice is presented and acted upon the pollock closure and had a terrible effect on the small-scale fleet. The UK handled it differently to the way we did. Most of our small-scale guys are wiped out or severely impacted. So going back to the Island Heritage Licence Bill of 2017, it developed from a recommendation of an Oireachtas committee in 2014. So it would have facilitated the introduction of a lot of these practical measures for the base of everything. And it's interesting to see at the Oceans Conference that Ursula von der Leyen says that the fishermen, especially small-scale fisheries, which should be prioritised, and they're going to work with Member States to ensure fair and transparent access to fishing opportunities and to make it easier to renew the small-scale fleet. I just agree with most of the things that have been said by my colleagues there. It's we do need to revisit that common fisheries policy so that we're not we're stuck in a time warp and that needs to change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keneally. Mr. Byrne.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just in relation to Senator Boyle's question in relation to the 213 million, whilst the previous government did indeed set up a task force, those of us that were part of that task force found it nearly impossible to get any scheme that could focus money from the Bar Fund to the various sectors that were in critical need of funding. And then if we did succeed, as I said in my opening statement, the Brexit Transition Fund for the processors, It was earmarked for 12 million. It's in the Seafood Task Force, but Ireland chose only to draw down 7 million of it, whereas the other 5 million could so easily have been given to the processing sector. So there is a disconnect really between opportunities there's there in funding, 100% European funding, which bar was, and how it was given to the sector. And I thought it was very short-sighted how we managed that. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really transform the sector after having lost 26% of its value. And I think that's one thing that's kind of glossed over and forgotten about. We that represent the sector, we have lost at a stroke of a pen in order to get a political decision of the TCA. And that was important, that there would be a smooth exit for the United Kingdom, for the European Union. But in order to get that, the fishing industry lost 26% of its value at a stroke of a pen. And to think that we can reconfigure it after that and go in 2 to 3 years back to normal, it's not possible economically. And we haven't, that penny hasn't dropped, that dawn hasn't broken yet. That's the consequences of why we're here.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne.
Thank you.
Next question is Deputy Ward.
Yeah. I want to welcome you, and I look forward to working with you over the term. I have a question first for Enda. In your opening statement, you say that the Common Fisheries Policy and the European Oceans Pact have not been delivered at national level. What needs to be done, in your opinion, to deliver this? What do you think?
Thank you. Yeah, from the small-scale perspective, we have been recognised as a producer organisation, but the way the funding structure is set up is not suitable for small-scale operators starting off. It's the same with the other inshore sector. We need basic infrastructure on piers and harbours used by small-scale fleets. We don't have power, water, waste disposal, lights, any of that stuff in it. Need some kind of a practical system for facilitating generational renewal. As I said earlier, everybody starts in a small boat. They get a taste for the sea and they just grow up into it. So it's very important to have the base right, that we can do it. Now, this thing about the scientific stuff, the way they did the pollock, that was really bad for the small-scale fleet, for the small local boats that do seasonal fishery. So I suppose having quotes from the mission announcing that they're going to facilitate this, it's good, but we need a targeted approach. It's a bit like the Bar Fund, the way it was delivered. I mean, it was handed out in such a parsimonious fashion, and the fact that they had to give some of it back didn't make any sense at all to us. So I think this is an ongoing thing. We need to get very practical here, because we're stuck with a 12-year certainty of having 20%, 6% less than what we had. So the CFP review may be an option, and this new Oceans Pact that they're working on, we may have opportunities to do something with that. But at a local level, we need a hands-on approach from the government and the department for all the sectors, and just get on with it. Thanks.
Okay. Second question. This is for Seafood Ireland Alliance. You mentioned that you recently engaged with the European Commissioner for Fisheries and Oceans. Do you feel there's an adequate opportunity for fishing organisations to engage with large European level? Is there an engagement previous to the recent EU-UK trade agreement? Is that open to any of you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much, Deputy Ward. I think one of the historical weaknesses Ireland has had is that we've been very weak at engagement at European level, both as a government and as a sector. And the competency for fish relies solely with the European Commission. And it has been that way since 1983 with the Common Fisheries Policy. So that is one of the weaknesses that we as a country need to address, both at official government level and a sectoral level. Because in Europe, in Brussels, that is where primarily the decisions are being taken. And we need to be stronger in Europe, and we need to be stronger there. We're all talking about the current evaluation of the common fisheries policy. There's no certainty that that will lead to a review, and in order to get it to a review stage where there may or may not be opportunity for Ireland, a lot of political lobbying needs to be done at European level, both by our government and by the sector. And it's now that we need to be at that. So one of the things, and this committee will have a very important function in that, is we need to look at what level of engagement we have, what level of representation we have at Brussels. And if necessary, that'll have to be beefed up. It's not necessary. I know it to be the case that it needs to be beefed up, but I will not draw a conclusion that the committee must draw. Thank you.
Okay.
I just want to say, in response there, about the CFP, we're hearing kind of positive whispers about, reforming the Common Fisheries Policy. But I'd just like to wonder, are the committee aware that the previous Fisheries Commission, in a visit to Ireland 3 years ago, when he was asked that question, he was quite honest and he said there is no appetite among the other member states. Obviously not, because they have a lovely situation. They're cleaning up in Irish waters. So we're hearing there was an evaluation 3 years ago, to 2013, an evaluation which was never going to lead to any sort of serious change. And now we're hearing possible renewing it or reviewing it, or whatever. I think without serious pressure from the Irish government, that the EU are not going to change. Not the Commission's fault, but the members who are harvesting in Irish waters, they're not going to sacrifice 1% back to us.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Deputy Whitmore.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming in. It's very nice to meet you. This is the first meeting of this committee, and I think it's going to be quite a large and long learning curve, but we look forward to working with you on that. I think just even from these conversations this morning, and I suppose then just going back for years and years, we've consistently heard stories of how Ireland hasn't been represented well at Europe, that we lost a lot of our fisheries, that we were disproportionately impacted by it. I can't honestly see a big change in that happening because we're such a small country, and the sort of business of usual approach, I think, as Cormac was saying, I think that is going to be what's applied, and I think we do need to fight for it. But I'm just wondering, in relation, say, even to the negotiations with the EU and the UK and the fallout from that for Ireland specifically, there was obviously not mistakes made, but maybe negotiations or leverage wasn't there for us. We are similarly going through a similar process now with Iceland. So what would you like to see happen now, specifically in relation to Iceland? What will be a good outcome? So if the EU came back and said, we have agreed third party or third country agreement, what would be a good outcome for you in relation to Iceland?
Well, thank you, Deputy Whitmore. The first thing I admit, we are a small country, but we mustn't lose sight that Ireland contributes 12% of the EU fishing grounds, 12%. And you mustn't lose sight that the viability of the Dutch, the Belgian, the French and the Spanish fleets depend on large part on Irish fishing grounds. That's what we bring to the table. And I think historically we haven't appreciated as a country what we're contributing to the EU in terms of fishing. We had a defeatist, or certainly we failed to value what we had when we were at the negotiating table for fisheries. That's the historics of it. And even beyond our fellow member states that I outlined, we also contribute fishing opportunities to Norway. Meanwhile, our own fleet are suffering. So there needs to be a whole in-depth argument, and this is where this committee, and the first time we've had a focused fisheries committee, I think in 20 years, that needs to drill down to what Ireland is really contributing. Small country as we are a major player in terms of fishing opportunity. I'll give the Iceland questions to John.
Thank you, Deputy Whitmore, for the question. Yeah, I think your question kind of implies the answer is a necessary answer, and I think we need to make ourselves clear on this, that the negotiation with Iceland is ongoing, to the best of our knowledge. How we engage with that is very important because, as I said earlier, we do need to extract the maximum benefit to Ireland from that negotiation, and there is opportunity there. To that end, you know, we have ourselves in the Seafood Ireland Alliance, the reason the 5 groups got together, the 5 organisations, was to establish better communications with our MEPs, with the European Commission, post-Brexit, because you're right, the landscape has changed. Our intention there is that we develop within Europe and we work with our ministers and with our department and among ourselves in the alliance as a Ireland Inc. representation in Brussels to get the maximum possible benefit that we can from any negotiation that's going on in Brussels, including the upcoming possible reform or at least review of the common fishery policy, where within that policy, and you're quite right, it is not an easy thing to change anything within the common fishery policy, but there are tweaks in there that could make life a lot better for Irish fishermen.
Okay. Could you expand on those tweaks?
I could. There's the issue of underutilised quota, where we have in some stocks, in a good few stocks, we're deficient in quota, and our vessels struggle with the minimal amount that they have available to them to catch. So within that common fishery policy, the quotas are divided up, and some countries have larger shares than others. And in that, many member states do not utilise fully the quota that they have available to them, so it just stays there uncut. So we're asking, and it's within our Common Fishery Policy Review report, and the recommendations are in there, you know, that we should develop a better system of swapping or accessing those underutilised quotas. Also within the Common Fishery Policy, we would like to see more adherence paid to the Hague preferences that Ireland has, and that those Hague preferences should be enshrined with a stronger legal basis within European law, within that common fishery policy, because currently, annually, we have to invoke those Hague preferences annually, and it's always a process to argue for them every year, you know, where if they were enshrined, that we would automatically be delivered, you know. Okay,
perfect. And these are all outlined in your document. I don't know, do we have a copy?
It's a department, it's a government document, yeah.
Okay.
Common Fishery Policy Review under the previous minister.
Okay,
Minister
perfect. So I'll have to take a look at that. And just, do I have... is it okay? All right, thank you. Just in relation to that, because obviously Article 17 is an element of the current CFP that we could potentially utilise, and it seems to me that we don't really utilise it to its full benefit. I don't know if we utilise it at all, actually, but I'm just wondering what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Sorry, Deputy, did you address that to me in particular?
Sorry, Mr. Clean. Yeah, I was just saying, just in relation to the Common Fisheries Policy and Article 17, I suppose, with your organisation and, you know, the sort of inshore and the smaller boats, I'm just wondering, what would you like to see, you know, the government, because obviously the government can apply that Article 17. So is that something that you would like to see happen, and what would you like to see incorporated into that consideration?
Well, that tends to go back to the Island Heritage Licence Bill that was processed to an advanced stage in a number of years ago, based again on the 2014 committee report. But that has to be revisited in the line of the review of the Common Fisheries Policy as well. Go back to the Iceland deal. We, as IMRO, didn't agree that Iceland as a third country should be allowed access. And the Commission pointed out that it's EU waters now, not Irish waters. And we're very small there. I think we thought it was a risky proposition for Ireland to engage, to accept that at this level. So, because I think we do have to put our foot down on lots of different things. That relative stability thing seems to be stuck in gear. It's like the Hague preferences. These things need to be revisited. It's not going to be pleasant for anyone, but it's a problem, and if we don't deal with it, we won't have an industry. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
For having to step out for 15 minutes to deal with the business committee, but I've read all your presentations beforehand. Indeed, I took the opportunity to put some of the issues directly to the Minister in the previous session there. So let's maybe get into these issues. So the first one is that we have third-party countries who do extensive trade with the European Union. Particularly I'm thinking here of Iceland, Norway, but also the Faroes, and I know they're under the obviously the connection with Denmark, who are a member state, but these things are not straightforward. And let's be frank about this, they have ignored science, the science that our fishing industry have to subscribe to under the Common Fisheries Policy. They've just ignored it. They've overfished, and they haven't been punished in any way for those actions. Indeed, they've been rewarded with lucrative trade. And that obviously has a direct impact on our own industry too. Brexit, I quoted from your own submission in the Seafood Ireland Alliance that this could have an impact of 800 million up until the duration of this 12-year period. It's already had an impact of about 180 million. Mr. Burke, just thank you for your submission. I know you've been campaigning with the industry for many years, and to thank Enda from IMRO, and I know that other fishing sectors will be looking on with interest today. I put to the Minister that obviously the establishment of a dedicated minister is, and that's thanks to the industry, all of you here today, and those listening who campaigned for this. We have a dedicated minister, very, very important, crucial. We have a dedicated committee here in Oireachtas at last, crucial. 2 major developments thanks to the campaigning of your industry, but we need to now see actions. And I just want to get your thoughts in terms of Europe. So, I have put forward the proposition of a dedicated office. I give it a name, Fish Ireland. You can come up with other names, but a dedicated office out in Brussels that is the industry, the seafood industry, and our government side by side fighting for our interests, trying to build allies, confronting injustice, speaking truths to power. Like if there's deals being done with third-party countries that are rewarding poor practice, that should not be happening. If there's practices that go against climate policy, carbon policy, that should not be happening. That those communities closest to the fishing grounds should benefit the most. So I just want to get a sense maybe from all of you here as to your thoughts about how we unite together and have a strategy and a plan, and at least try to restructure the Common Fisheries Policy to be fair. And I want to get a sense from all of you about that and the unity of the industry. I want to commend all of you here today because you have united together in all your sectors to stand up for Irish interests. It's not easy because everybody's trying to survive. All of your members are trying to make a living, having to be forced to compete with each other. But despite all of that, you've united together to stand up for the industry together. So just to get a sense of what we need to do, what actions that you see we need to be taking with the new minister now.
Thank you very much, Deputy McLaughlin. In fairness, it's a very pertinent question. You're 100% right. The third countries that you alluded to, Norway, Iceland and the Faroes, have been consistently overfishing mackerel by 155%, 55% more than they're entitled to. Now they've reduced that to 45% more than they're entitled to. The consequences of that for Ireland are dire. Mackerel is the second most valuable stock that we have. It used to be the most valuable stock we had until the TCA transfers. The reckless behaviour of those countries in overfishing beyond their entitlement and beyond scientific advice is going to have consequences. We await in the next 2 weeks what's the scientific advice for the year ahead for mackerel. We're fearful of that. But not alone that, those of us that are working within the rules, those of us that are compliant with control and enforcement rules and regulations, and Ireland is the gold standard in that at European level, are competing with countries that are fishing 45 and 55% beyond their entitlement. and that is eroding our position in the global markets. And that has been the case for the last 3 years. So that is the climate that we're competing in. And at the same time, we are members of a European Union that are openly trading with Norway, unrestricted access for their salmon into the European markets. And we have to visit and see that happen at the same time that they, by their actions, are undermining the Irish fleet. That is very difficult for us as representatives of the fishing industry to stomach. And that is where we, as a member state, need to be banging the drum and challenging the European institution. We either all work by the rules or there's no rules. It's not, it's not anything beyond that. That's the facts of the matter. So Deputy McLaughlin's 100% right. Europe are weak on key elements, and given access to countries that are flagrantly and blatantly overfishing is wrong, and it has to be called out. It has to be called out. And we're in the process of coastal states, and I want to make apologies for E. O'Donnell of the IFPO, Dominic Rehan of the Killybegs Fishermen's Organisation, and Patrick Murphy from the Irish South and West, who are currently in London at the coastal state talks that are running in parallel with this. But Europe needs to take a stronger stance. And, the competency, as I said earlier, of fishing lies with the Commission. But we are part of the European Union, and we need to strengthen. And going back to the second part of your question, and I alluded to it earlier, for too long we've been too weak in Europe. If Europe have the competency, and they have, for fishing policy, we need to be in there, front and centre, strong and united. That is something we need to focus on, and that is something that, particularly as we run into the presidency of the European Union, that we need to get there. Particularly also if this evaluation goes on to a common fisheries policy review. We're talking about the review will present opportunities. That's correct. But are we ready to take these opportunities? Have we the wherewithal to shape where the decision making is taking place? I seriously doubt it. So, in terms of this committee, and I fully support the committee has a massive role to play. The fact that we have a new dedicated minister is also critically important. We have a robust programme for government that I view as a minimalist approach. I think we should aim for that and more. But we need to get started. And as far as I can see, the level of representation we have in Europe, the level of engagement, and the level of sectoral and departmental and government engagement needs to be better aligned and stronger represented in Europe. That's my view. Thank you.
Get the response from the over to, if you don't mind, Chairperson.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a couple of points in response to you. There's a lot of talk here today about the CFP and about the EU Commission, but not so much talk about work that needs to be done here at home. And I'll just two little examples here. October 2014, at the time Commissioner Damanaki was about to leave, there was a seismic shift in the division of EU mackerel quotas. And just to put this into perspective, at that time Ireland had a quota of over 90,000 tonnes of mackerel, and the Faroese, for example, had 8,500. As of today, the Irish mackerel quota is at a historic all-time low, because we're sticking to the scientific advice, of less than 40,000 tonnes, while the Faroes, who are not, they were ignoring the advice, their quota is approximately 118,000 tonnes. So that kicks back to the processing sector. But with regards to the issue, I say there's issues here at home, and I'm kind of getting into this area here, but I think we have to ask ourselves, how many successful and vital inshore fisheries have been shut down in Ireland over the past 30 years, but continue to be utilised in other EU member states? Wild salmon, bass, freshwater eels, in more recent times spurdog, although I think it's reopened under very tight restrictions, and pollock, which the quota is so minuscule now that it might not as well be opened. These are not questions for the EU, they are for our own department, our own regulators.
Just a brief, just to put it into perspective, what Cormac has just said. My understanding is the population of the Faroe Islands is around the same as the Inishowen Peninsula, where I'm from. Yeah. So basically, that's the equivalent of the population of the Inishowen Peninsula having a quota 3 times more in mackerel than the entire island of Ireland. Correct. That's astonishing. That's absolutely astonishing what he just said.
But, sorry, we're obeying the rules and we're trying to manage a stock, trying to be sustainable, which is so important in all fisheries. And yet the EU Commission, who are supposedly making the rules for us, are largely ignoring other countries who are just, let's fish it out.
Just to mention, I'm being a little more lenient because we are ahead of time. And what I'll do, we'll just finish out this particular piece of engagement, and then we'll go for another round of very brief pointed questions before we finish. Is that okay with everyone?
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so I'll ask Mr. Lynch and then Mr. Keneally to come in on this particular issue, and then we'll go to the floor again.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Deputy McLaughlin, for the question, and absolutely, you are correct. We've been long pushing for action to be taken against Norway and Faroes and Iceland for the overfishing that they have engaged in, which has had a detrimental and negative impact on the stock. The stock is now in decline when it was actually increasing at the time they awarded themselves these unilateral quotas, and that's where that kicked in. You know, they decided they were going to take more, and they took more. We have had many discussions with our own government, our own department, and with the Commission on this issue. And we always asked that the trade agreements with those countries would be used to force them, or to encourage them, I should say, to fish within sustainable limits and within the quota and within the sharing agreement that was established in 2014, in which, in that agreement, Ireland and Europe actually gave quota to the Faroes and Iceland and Norway at that stage. And they still came back looking for more. So, you know, when that happens, you need to deal with it in a fair and proper manner. So using the trade agreements with those countries is the only form of punishment that is available. And it's encouraging to see that I think last week or 2 weeks ago that the Europe has adopted what's now known as the Faroese measures, where the Commission will have the option of applying trade sanctions on those countries if they continue to overfish. But we would encourage the Commission from an Ireland, and this is where we get to the Ireland Inc. point of view that you spoke about, with an office and the capability to deal as one in Brussels. As I said earlier, we need to work together when we are in Brussels, because we're all looking for the same thing. So we need to work together, and we need to bring these countries that are fishing unilaterally, and part of that is done in our waters, in European or Irish waters, whatever way you want to look at it. And we can't allow that to continue, and we need to encourage the Commission to use these new measures to bring those third countries back into line with the policy of fishing sustainably and within the advice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Keneally, would you like to contribute on this particular question? We might, if that's the case, we might go to another round of questions, and I just ask members to keep these very pointed, very brief. We have about 15 minutes left, and maybe to direct those questions at an individual, one of the individual witnesses, if that is okay. So, Deputy Whitmore.
Thank you. I want to dig down a little bit more into the issue with the overfishing, and so it's not that Europe has allowed the Faroe Islands to fish or given them a quota or anything like that. They are just fishing there, and Europe isn't taking any action against it. Is that the thrust of the?
The thrust of the charge we make is that Norway and Iceland and the Faroes have unilaterally set quotas for themselves that is beyond the scientific advice and beyond their legal entitlement as per the previous coastal state sharing arrangement. So they've set a unilateral quota, not based on science, not based on entitlement, just based on what they think.
Okay. And then it sort of comes back to what you were saying, John, is like, well, what could the sanctions be? And the trade agreements seem to be an obvious one. but as with anything in Europe, everything goes very, very slowly. Is there anything that Ireland can do in her own right? I don't know if there's some case could be taken, or just even just to highlight the issue.
Yeah, I'm not sure about a case, but as I said just a while ago, the Commission now have adopted these fair OEs measures. So that allows, that's a regulation that will allow the Commission to use the trade agreement to encourage these third countries to come into line in regard to fishing within their legal entitlement and within the advice that ICES gives annually.
Okay, and should we not, as a state, then be saying that we don't want any discussions with Iceland if at the same time Iceland are, I mean, is that not another point of leverage that we have? Iceland obviously wants to have an agreement.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of that agreement from our talking with the Commission and with our own government is that part of this agreement should be that Iceland comes back into line with its legal share and within the sustainable fishing. Yeah.
The other thing that needs to be focused on is that the competency of negotiating with Iceland rests with the EU Commission, and they will be looking at larger geopolitical issues, including the fact that Iceland has committed to holding a referendum on possible membership of the EU. So there's a lot of geopolitical factors other than fish. So Ireland and the representatives in the fishing sector have to take a decision. Do we stand alone and oppose it, or do we try to shape it, as John Lynch has said, by forcing them to reduce their overfishing and possibly to give an opportunity to a much starved fishing sector here? So there's much bigger geopolitical issues at play. Thanks.
Thank you.
Senator Boyd. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, gentlemen, for your insight into it. And I think this is the area that we need yours to come in more regular and give us an update of what's going on and tell us as it is. You know, the elephant in the room here too is we have problems with the department at home, and we have to get them sorted too. And I mean, Europe is a problem. And I would agree with Pádraig. We had the Minister in here earlier on, and I asked him would he put somebody out to Europe for us to lobby on our behalf, because the 2 days that I was out there with yours, I could see how the Dutch was working that room. The dog on the street knows what they're doing, and we have nobody out there. And on that day we were out there, the people that was representing us said at the last meeting we had that night was we only lost 26%. To me, like, and I still feel like pulling them across the table. It beggars belief that somebody can say we only lost 26%. We decimated the Irish fishing industry in one stroke of a pen. So that's why we need yours coming in here, and I would support Pádraig's, McLaughlin's TD there. If we could have a designated out in Europe, that one would work with the other. But, like, I mean, we also have some opportunities out there with foreign vessels to come into land fish too. But the department is a problem there. Like the big ports of years ago, they're no way welcoming them to boats coming in now. There seems to be a thing there. Nobody wants to touch Ireland. And that's something we're going to have to address. We could get we could get our factories back working again. We could help the towns again, the coastal communities, if we could get a bit extra fish in that's not of an Irish quota. But we have to get the department to work on that too. So I thank you very much for coming in, and it's great to have you here, and hopefully we'll see you back in the next lot of weeks again, and we continue. Yours feed us the information, and we have a good chairman here, and there's a good committee. We want to make a difference. We're here to make a difference. We're not here just to sit and do nothing. I want to see the Irish fishing industry climb up the ladder again. We were up there before, and there's no reason we can't get back there again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I acknowledge your contribution. I think the reality is that Brexit was a massive hammer blow to the industry. But if you look at 2017 to 2020, the decline had started, albeit the Brexit transfer of 26% of the value really hammered the industry to the ground. I think you, in your contribution, have hit the nail on the head. We need to do things differently. And when an industry, be it this fish we're talking about today, but if you take any industry in the economy and to take 26% of its value away for a political decision and think things will continue as normal and there'll be no impact as a consequence of that. It's naivety, it's economic naivety. And I think we need to get out of that space. And that's a message that needs to drive home to the department, to the minister, and to everyone. This isn't going to go away. The extension confirms it's going to be the reality forevermore ad infinitum. And we need to do things differently. And that includes our department, that includes industry, and that includes how we are engaging right at the heart of Europe. And that is the challenge that faces all of us. That is the challenge. Now, we can do it. And the great thing I have to say is the demand for Irish fish has never been as high. I was in Barcelona at the trade fair. We were sold out within hours, albeit we're reduced in what we're selling. But the demand is massive. And as an industry, rather than employing 17,000 people, I should be here today talking to you about how I can grow that to 35, 36,000 in the next 10 years. That potential is there. But it's never going to be there if we keep doing what we're doing for the last 20 years. And that is a mindset that has to change. Thank you.
Thank you. I might just bring in, if it's okay, Mr. Lynch, and we'll come back to you for a response. Deputy Ward, very, very briefly, if that's okay, and then Deputy McLaughlin, we only have a few minutes left.
I just want to talk about certain areas. I'll just give you an example. Now, we know about the fisheries, especially around the coastal areas, and I'm from Armagh Island, where we're dying. We used to be a thriving industry. Buttonport used to be thriving. So I get messages in from people who are still fishing in Ireland, and they're no longer fishing in Ireland. They send questions in, and I say, you know what? As someone who's newly elected, I will take these questions and put them out there and represent you. So Greencastle deserves the designation because there's herring being landed there. The nearest port with landing facilities is where the scientific studies have identified herring, right? Rathmullen is no longer a pelagic landing spot. Being able to land in Greencastle rather than Derry meets the government's objectives of having boats land in Irish ports, and that then will be able, the fish factory, to secure supplies of raw materials, okay? So we need to make Greencastle a landing port for pelagic species over 10 tonnes. That is essential, okay? Because when we are going to Killybegs, these towns that were once thriving, and you meet children who are of near school age who used to work in these factories are no longer working in the factories. That's Dad's boat over there. It's tied up. It's only been out a few months. We need to encourage these children to be coming into this industry. Instead, the way things are, they're being driven away. And I just wanted to put that statement out there.
Then we'll take a round of responses, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, you will know that my own party published a survey yesterday. And none of the commentary, none of the findings will shock you. You know, I mean, you all know the reality on the ground. But I suppose I want to get some feedback in terms of, like, we have a survey where 9 out of 10 respondents, and these are fishermen, these are people who are businesses or workers in the seafood industry from all around Ireland. 9 out of 10 say that the industry has been in serious decline over the last 10 years. Not one single respondent, because they had a range of responses, said that there's been a significant improvement. Not one single person responded said that over the last 10 years. Almost 9 out of 10 said they wouldn't encourage their children to continue to be in the industry. That's just heartbreaking. You know, these are intergenerational fishermen and fishing families. But we're about, in this committee, looking at how we turn it around, how we get to hope. But I do want to talk about how does that tally with some of the reports I see from BIM that talk about, I mean, is it the case that we're being forced to import fish from overseas? I mean, there is a different report from BIM today, which is, in my view, more accurate, reflecting some of the challenges around the piers and harbours around the coast. But I've seen reports where if you didn't know anything about the industry, you would read those reports and go, well, the industry's in healthy shape. You know, it's moving forward. And so how can it be? How can it be that here is a survey where almost everybody says this industry in decline, decommissioning programmes, the loss of quota, and by the way, it's not just offshore; it's inshore, it's islands fishermen, it's aquaculture. Every sector is telling us this. How can that not be reflected in reports that we're getting from the state? And I suppose I'm not trying to get you into conflict with BIM, I want to be clear, but it's let's get an honest picture of where we're at. So if we don't agree the problem, how can we solve it? That's what I always say. If everybody around the table doesn't agree, this is what the problem is, that's the starting point. That's when you start to turn it around. So I suppose I just want to get a bit of direction, maybe from everybody about that.
Just before we go for a round of responses, and these will be just final responses to the question, I just want to make a couple of comments and pose a question of my own. Earlier, when the Minister was here and we were questioning him, I asked him a question about attitudes and culture at the heart of government, and the report that Deputy McLaughlin alluded to there. It's not surprising. It's still shocking to me, even though it's not surprising. It's devastating, really, the lack of confidence, the lack of hope within the industry. And one of the key findings for me was that 9 out of every 10 people engaged, every respondent to the survey, does not believe that the Irish government is batting for the industry. There's quite clearly an issue there with a culture and an attitude to the Irish fishing industry within government, over many governments over successive years, that needs to be challenged. And most speakers here have mentioned the fact that now that there is a Minister of State and there is a committee, that this is progress. But I'd be interested to hear your views on how we together, people, public representatives, industry representatives, the industry as a whole, BIM, various agencies and government, can lead a change in culture and a change in attitudes, so that we as a system, as an economy, as a society, as a people, have a more healthy attitude, which will inform, I think, political decision making and the level of political priority that goes to it. So with that question posed, I might open it up to each of the four of you to in turn give a response to the last three questions, and it'll be the final round. Thank you.
Sorry, just in response, you've used the same word I was going to use. Really, the results of that report, they don't really surprise any of us. Excuse me, I have a sore throat. I think the biggest thing to come across is the disillusionment from the people in the industry. And the reason I say it's no surprise is we have 20 years of BIM fantasy reports that are dressed up to fool the public, but the people in the industry know they're not true. We have the department who things reached the stage where people said they're not working for the industry. And then we have the SFPA. So the poor relationship with those three organisations, that reflects back. So from the fisherman on the pier who's dealing with these people, and these are semi-state bodies, he's nothing else to presume, only the government doesn't care about me, because they're paying these people who aren't working for the industry I'm in. So that's a short answer to what you were asking.
Thank you, Deputy McLaughlin, for your question. And indeed, I meant to address the survey, which we welcome in the industry. I think the more that's documented in terms of the state of the industry, the better. Because I think for too long we've been all too silent as we watch the industry go down and reduce and become less relevant. I think in my 51 years, the only two optimistic things I have seen in fishing have happened in the last 9 months, where we have a dedicated minister who is given energy and commitment to the sector, and I welcome that, and that we have a robust, at long last, Fisheries Committee that has a massive role to play in the time ahead. And of course, we have the programme for government and all that that contains. Look, at any agency of state that's foolish enough to publish something that's not accurate are only making themselves irrelevant by their own actions. we all know ourselves that represent the industry, the state that it's in. Those that work in the industry know the challenges that they're operating on. So if any agency wants to go into fantasy economics or works of fiction, it reflects worse on them than on anything else. I don't think I need to say anything more about that. The days of fooling the people are over. We have an industry that is challenged to the hilt, but we have an industry that's resilient, willing to fight, willing to build back. All we need is a fair shot, a level playing field. And like any other sector of the economy, in my lifetime I saw the beef industry fall twice. I saw the mushroom sector fall. I've seen different sectors of the economy struggle. We're struggling, and we have been struggling for the last 4 years. But there's very little hand of help being reached out to us. And so it hasn't been dealt with fairly or equally. And what's at stake? There's 17,000 coastal jobs at stake. That mightn't sound much to an economy that has millions of jobs. But can anyone here or anyone listening tell me how you can replace that amount of jobs in rural, peripheral and maritime areas? Those 17,000 jobs are the equivalent of massive mini Intels. They're not replaceable, but communities depend upon that. So there has to be a whole mindset, and Pádraig McLaughlin is right, that the actions of the department in the past have been hostile to fishing. I've seen it. I was a public representative representing a coastal community for 10 years. I've seen what they did, what they're capable of. I'm not going to go any further than that because I'm not going to dwell on the past. I want to shape a future that I can leave after I retire, that leaves a resilient, robust industry. And that's what we need to focus on. And that is what I've been continuously saying here today. What we've been doing to date has failed. We need to admit that. The first step to recovery is you admit that what you've done has failed. And now we need to do it better. Thanks, Deputy McLaughlin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Deputies and Senator, for your comments and questions. I suppose when Minister Dooley was first appointed, we welcomed him, and we welcomed his ambition to have more and better engagement, and that has now evolved into the establishment of this Fisheries Committee, which we very much appreciate, and we look forward to engaging with you as much as possible in the future, and we intend to come in as often as possible, and as often as you require us to do so, to answer your questions or to inform you. On the survey, Deputy McLaughlin just shows the truth of an industry in decline, an industry in trouble. The truth on the ground is that this is, and whether it's how people feel or how things actually are, is irrelevant. The industry is in a very low place, and it has been on the way down for a number of years. Three things that have driven it down even more quickly or more rapid was Brexit, COVID, and the fuel crisis. Those things have happened, and our job now is to work to alleviate, to try and rebuild. We're looking into a future of a fuel transition where we're going to have to achieve more efficiencies with an ageing fleet. That's impossible. We do have to look into a fleet rebuilding programme, a more efficient, cleaner, more modern fleet to meet the state's ambitions and the world's ambitions in terms of carbon neutralisation. That's a given. It has to be done. In terms of everything else, and in terms of our catching opportunities up to now, or up to those events, or even previous to those events, when a fisherman had a bad year or a bad week or a bad month, he had the opportunity, because he had the fish available and quota to him, to fish a little bit harder to make up the gap. That was the resilience we had. But now we don't have that resilience. If you don't take your opportunity in a month or in a year, you've lost that opportunity. You cannot regain. You can only catch what's allocated to you the next year or the next month. So there is no opportunity to build a resilience within your business in the fishing industry. And that resilience is what kept the industry going up to now. But that resilience or reserves or whatever you want to call it, that is now gone. And this has in fact gone into negative figures for most operators within the catching sector, certainly, and I think possibly within other upstream and downstream businesses from the catching sector. So I think as my colleague said, we have to recognise that we're in a bad place, but we do also have to ensure that we engage and work together, as we said earlier, to achieve a better proposition for the seafood industry and modernise and maintain those 17,000 coastal jobs, which are, I believe, irreplaceable. And with any other, there's no other industry going to come in and replace 17,000 jobs around the peripheral coastline of Ireland. You know, so we need to rebuild and maintain those jobs, both on shore and on the islands. As Deputy Ward said, we need to be all inclusive here and rebuild for everybody and build a modern, sustainable fishing industry for the future. Thank you.
Mr. Keneally.
Thank you, Deputy. Just a few points in general. I agree with John and Brendan there. We're in trouble and we need to move forward. I look at the speech again about this Oceans Pact, where the Commission are saying that there's extreme weather, unfair competition are putting many of them out of business. One of the things they want to do is no young European who grows up beside the sea should be forced to leave their home. So that's the message from the top. So we need to give that a bit of practicality. In that Ocean Pact, again, it says that for every fishing job at sea, every fisherman creates 30 upstream and downstream jobs. The EU imports 70% of its fish as well. So there's another thing that you mentioned is food security, which is extremely important now, especially with the short supply chain stuff along the coast. Going back to the attitude of the government and the agencies, they seem to have been caught up in a kind of bureaucratic nightmare of some kind. They seem to look for how things can't be done as opposed to how they could be done. So we're going to have to find a way of interpreting these things in a positive way that we can actually rebuild an industry that we let go and we shouldn't have let go. But going forward, that's the only thing we can do. We have a dedicated minister. This committee will be useful. So just focus on the future, as Brendan says. Thanks.
Gurv Míle Mágat, Russell Keneally. I want to thank our witnesses for being with us here today, and for the Minister and his officials in the first half of the meeting, and our sectoral representatives for the second part of the meeting. I think we had a really good discussion. I also want to thank the members for their cooperation. This is the first meeting that I have chaired in which we have had witnesses. We've had a number of business meetings just to set up the committee and go through those processes. So I want to thank you for your engagement and your cooperation. This won't be the last time that we will have you before this committee. I think this committee, the purpose of it is to give voice, in my estimation, in my opinion, is to give voice to coastal communities, to the industry, and to make sure that we are changing the attitudes, the culture, the policies that need to be changed to result in thriving, sustainable communities all across our coastline, all around our island. So given that there's no further meetings, I'll adjourn the meeting, and just to wish you safe home. Agus Gurv Míle Mágat Oireachtas.
Very well.